The doll in the attic. Emily was a quiet girl with a wild imagination. At the age of 12, her family moved to an old Victorian house nestled deep in the countryside. The house had tall windows, creaky wooden floors, and an attic that Emily was explicitly told to stay away from. Her parents were always busy with work, leaving Emily alone to explore the vast property. She spent hours in the overgrown garden and the library filled with dusty books. But her curiosity always wandered to the attic. The door was locked, and the rusty key hung on a nail in the kitchen. One stormy afternoon, while her parents were out, the wind howled and the rain lashed against the windows. Emily sat in the living room, staring at the attic key. The storm made her feel braver than usual, as if the weather itself dared her to uncover the attic's secrets. With hesitant steps, she grabbed the key, climbed the narrow staircase, and unlocked the attic door. The air was thick with the scent of mothballs and mildew. Dust danced in the dim light streaming through a small circular window. Boxes were stacked haphazardly, and cobwebs clung to every corner. At the center of the attic was an antique rocking chair, and on it sat a porcelain doll. The doll had glossy black hair, pale skin, and glassy blue eyes that seemed to follow Emily as she moved. Its lips were painted in a faint smile, but something about it felt wrong. Emily hesitated, then picked up the doll. It was cold to the touch, heavier than she expected. She noticed a name stitched onto the doll's dress: Annabelle. That night, Emily brought the doll to her room, unable to resist its eerie charm. She placed it on a shelf and stared at it from her bed. Thunder rumbled outside as she drifted to sleep. Around midnight, Emily awoke to the sound of soft creaking. At first, she thought it was the wind, but then she saw it, the rocking chair in the corner of her room, swaying gently. Her heart raced as she realized the doll was no longer on the shelf. It was now sitting in the chair. Emily froze, her eyes fixed on the doll. Its head tilted slightly, and she could swear its smile had widened. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The room was silent, except for the rain tapping against the window. Summoning her courage, Emily reached for the lamp beside her bed and turned it on. The light flooded the room, but the doll remained in the chair, unmoving. "Maybe I'm just imagining things," Emily muttered, trying to convince herself. She placed the doll back on the shelf and crawled into bed, pulling the covers tightly around her. The next morning, Emily found muddy footprints leading from her bed to the attic stairs. Her parents dismissed her story as a prank she was playing on herself, but Emily knew better. That evening, she decided to return the doll to the attic. As she climbed the stairs, the air grew colder. When she opened the attic door, she gasped. The rocking chair was gone, replaced by a circle of burned wood on the floor. The doll's head twisted to face her, its glassy eyes now filled with something dark and sinister. "Why did you take me?" a voice whispered, faint and childlike. Emily screamed, dropping the doll. It landed face down, but the whispering continued, louder and more insistent. She bolted down the stairs, locking the attic door behind her. That night, she begged her parents to leave the house, but they dismissed her fears as childish imagination. The next morning, her parents were gone. Their bed was untouched, and their car was still in the driveway. Emily searched every room, but there was no sign of them. Desperate, she called the police, but they found nothing. That night, Emily sat alone in the living room, clutching a flashlight. The power had gone out, and the house was plunged into darkness. She heard faint footsteps above her, followed by the sound of the rocking chair creaking. Summoning her courage, she climbed the stairs one last time. The attic door was ajar, and inside, the doll sat on the rocking chair, her parents' wedding rings clutched in her tiny porcelain hands. Emily screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the shadows. The last thing she saw was the doll's smile widening, its glassy eyes glowing in the darkness. The house was found abandoned years later, with no trace of the family. Locals say the attic door opens on its own during storms, and sometimes, if you listen closely, you can hear the faint sound of a rocking chair and a child's laughter.